So what if you could get anything you wanted in the world? Well, hang in there. I'm going to give you some tips and ideas on how that might happen. But before I do that, I wanted to start off with a quote from my buddy's book, Brian Monahan. And we'll put the book up right now. Here we go. Customer Delight 365 by Brian Monahan. So the quote I picked for today is, to think creatively, we must be able to look afresh at what we normally take for granted. George Neller. Brian says, customer delight is created by adding creativity to the process of customer service. A great technique for creating customer delight is to imagine yourself as the customer of your business. How does it feel? Ask yourself, how does it feel? So going back to the original quote that spurred that information from a wonderful buddy, Brian, to think creatively, we must be able to look afresh at what we normally take for granted. So that kind of leads into today's topic that I have. And the topic is, what is the topic today? Are you thinking or living linearly? That's easy for me to say, right? So what we mean by that is knowing where your starting point is and figuring out every step by the next step, the next step, the next step, having the need to know how to get there. It is a bit of a cause and effect, like if you do this, this will happen. That's true to a point, but what my idea today is around is not being so hung up on the need to know how exactly you're going to do something. For example, if I was to put up this banner here and let you have a peek, for example, your current reality is not fixed. In other words, it means what's happening for you today, the way you're living your life, doesn't have to be that way every day, unless, of course, you want it to be. If you want to change, then there's some work that needs to be done that you get to do. And I want you to think about this, for example, the 4-minute mile. Now, I don't remember exactly when it was. I think it was in the early 1950s, maybe 55, 57, somewhere around in that stage of our time, until Richard Bannister broke the 4-minute mile. Nobody thought it was possible. Once everybody saw that it was doable and it was possible, then others were able to do it as well. Another example of that is, I don't know if you know the Cliff Young story. He's an Australian. He was age 60, I believe, when he started running ultra marathons. And now ultra marathon is much longer than a traditional marathon. I believe they're about 500 kilometers, 500 miles, somewhere in that range. They take a few days to run, for sure. He showed up in a pair of Wellingtons, rubber boots, and overalls. And people thought he was nuts because everybody else was in Lycra and special shoes, and they were lean, mean running machines. And so they interviewed him and asked him what made him think he could run the race, the ultra marathon. What made him think he could do that? And he says, well, I come from a station, which is equivalent to a ranch here. I have a bunch of sheep. I don't have horses or a motorcycle. So I run around my property and herd the sheep up and move them to another spot. And so they thought he was crazy. Anyway, he got to run the race. And he didn't know what he didn't know, and he wasn't thinking linear. He just did what he always did. Instead of chasing sheep, he was chasing a goal, an objective. And he ended up taking a day and a half off the race. That's why this is up there. And how he did that was because he didn't know what he didn't know, and he didn't think linear and didn't follow suit that everybody else did. He just ran every day, never took any sleep. He was so far ahead, like a day and a half off the race, that they wanted him to stop and slow down because they weren't going to be ready for the finish until, a day and a half later, but he just carried on and continued doing it. So he took a day and a half off an ultra marathon because he didn't think linearly. He thought creatively. How could he creatively and innovatively make it happen? So he did what he did. And as a result, won the race. So guess what happened the next year? Somebody broke his record because they chose to run the race the same way he did. They didn't sleep. They didn't know they could go. I guess the model before was run 18 hours, sleep 6. What Cliff showed them was you can do it a different way. So they started doing it his way and broke his record. So big deal. What does that mean? Well, it means that, how does that apply to my life? I started a business in the early 90s. I was sick and tired of working for the corporations and being told what to do and your CYA, cover your ass mentality. And so I took a year off, and it ended up being 2 years because I didn't set any goals. It's funny what happens if you have nowhere to go, then whatever road you take takes you there. So, well, getting into a deep dive of my life lesson back then, I just knew I didn't want a job and I wanted to be able to start a business. And I did a bunch of different things. I did information interviewing. I did research as to what kind of business I'd like to start if I was going to start a business. And then I proceeded to take a day and a half off the race and doing those sort of things. I didn't have the pocket full of money, and I was in debt and some other things. It wasn't an ideal time to start a business, but I wanted to take a day and a half off the race. I wanted to prove that these things I've been studying most of my life that have been refined to and demonstrated by other people, that if you apply this different kind of thinking, non-linear thinking, that you can achieve much more in life. So part of the key is to have a mission and a vision as to what it is. Because if you can't envision the end result, how do you know if you're heading in the right direction, or even if you're getting close to it? It's pretty hard, I think. So I ended up taking a day and a half off the race. I helped a number of businesses become the leaders in their field. I became their sales agency. Not that what I did was unique in terms of the role I played, because there's a lot of great salespeople out there that have taken on a product and sold it and represented it really well. Speaking of that, a friend of mine is a road warrior in the roofing fabrication business, where he sells great products and fasteners to the roofing community. And he's done that for a long time, grew up in that business, and he's very passionate about it, does a really, really good job. So I was kind of doing the same thing, only I was using software as the tool that I was representing. And I wasn't really on the road being a road warrior. I was more about just helping a company or two win at their offering, and they became the leaders in their field. One was a geological tool, the other was an engineering tool. And I did that for about 10 years. But along the way, I learned a whole bunch of cool stuff and realized that I didn't want to sell software. I wanted to be in this business. Yeah, as soon as it shows up, I'll show you what business I wanted to be in. My banners are not working today. I need a technician. I wanted to be in the belief building business. It turned it into a ticker tape on the bottom here. So that's the business I'm in. So the Business Renovator is kind of all about that. There's 3 topics I talk about, whether I'm on with myself or if I have guests. And the 3 major topics I represent or want to talk about for everybody is sales, marketing, and mindset. All 3 of those are an important aspect. Sometimes one's more important than the other at any given time along your journey, but all 3 together are significant pieces of the puzzle, is what I've learned. That is what I've learned. And the way we can do that is tap into our most precious resource. I'm having trouble with the S's today. Anyway, and that's our thinking. What we think about most of the time is what we bring about. So I would encourage you to think about your ideal future. Envision it as if it's already done. And if you already know how to do it, maybe it's not a big enough vision. Scare yourself a bit. Excite yourself a lot. And if you have the 2 of those together, you've got what I believe is the magic dust magic formula for success. If it doesn't scare you and excite you about the same amount of time, same amount of energy, it's probably not the best thing for you. Your goal's probably not big enough. Anyway, that's my rant for today. Let's see who's joined me. Oh, I got to go back to before. I just got to go back to this one. This is one of my favorite pieces. Yes, you expect success. And that's one of the pieces to the puzzles to thinking in a non-linear fashion. As you expect success no matter what. You focus on what you want and why you want it, which is really essentially your mission and vision. And if you've got those two things down and move towards it with an expectation of achieving it, you'll be introduced to new people, you'll get new ideas, you'll get new hunches. And when you do that, you want to write them down in a reflective thinking journal. That's the other Velcro component of this, which helps it stick. So you don't forget the great ideas. And a couple of ways you could do that is you could write it down. If you're driving, you could carefully dictate it into your device so that you've got the thought there, so that when you go back to it, you can recall what you thought about. Or if you get thoughts at the while you're sleeping and you wake up in the middle of the night or sometime, have a pen and paper and write it down there. Capture these thoughts so they don't slip away and evaporate. Anyway, who's here with me today? I see there's somebody here. Hey, it's my buddy Kellen Ann, who is the gal who makes cards that wow. And do they ever? If you've ever caught her, people who've received her cards, they actually go wow, because they actually wow everybody that's seen them. She's very creative and she has a unique product. If you want to wow your customers, friends, and family, check out Cards That Wow. I think she now has her website up. Thanks for being here, Kellen. That's my show for today. We'll see you here in probably Wednesday, because I usually not have one on Tuesdays, because Kellen Ann has a Tuesday coffee talk with Kellen and guests. Wishing you much success.